All right, we're starting with slide 29, and it's kind of the beginning of chapter 9.3. We've been covering this for the past week, and we're soon to end our notes, but I want to make sure that we go over each slide, just in case you're missing some, and we need you to get it done. All right, on this slide, you have 4 food items, and your goal is to recognize which are lipids, or a form of fat, primarily, which is a form of carbohydrate and which is a protein. So can you look at A and know if it's a lipid, carbohydrate, or protein? And can you look at B and know if it's a lipid, carbohydrate, or protein? And the same for C and D. Finally, you're to estimate with percents, what do you think your daily food intake is of lipids, carbs, and proteins? And the slide has an example here. It says, the example might be that 25% of what you eat are lipids or fats. 50% might be carbs, and 25 might be protein. Now, that's just an example, but it does need to, whatever numbers and percents you come up with, it needs to equal 100% daily food intake. All right, moving on. All right, we can skip this slide. Here we have a slide for ATP. I think it's our second slide for ATP, and it just gives another definition or a way to think about this form of energy for our body. So we got to copy down the definition, and the task here says reread our second definition of ATP, which is this is the second definition of ATP. And it says apply your understanding or your comprehension of this definition to this problem below. And this problem below shows an enzyme, and this enzyme, like all enzymes, are a type of protein that cause chemical reactions. So your goal is to look at this right here. These are the atoms or molecules that this enzyme bonds to. And as you can see, this is before, and this picture is after. And right here, this guy is ATP, and you can see it's providing the enzyme with something. And you can see that the structure overall, the original atoms or molecules that originally connected look different now. The structure looks different. Your responsibility is to explain ATP's involvement in this from before and after, and what ATP helped the enzyme do in this situation. Finally, the situation explains that when this becomes this, and the body turns these original molecules or atoms into this blue structure here, that you get this result. You get people who are able to help build body parts. So in the chemical reaction where the enzyme takes these and makes them into this structure, we get this person looking like this. And it's not super precise about how people build muscle, but it's related to how people build muscle. So you want to relate what the enzyme's doing and how the ATP helps it to how this body transforms. So there you go. So you want to just be able to summarize and interpret. So you're basically looking at this picture, this whole situation, and trying to make sense of it by connecting those ideas we just discussed in your notebook. All right, here is our first definition for cellular respiration, and this explains that equation we've been looking at where we see, we'll see if there's a picture later on. Anyhow, here's the definition for it. It says a series of chemical reactions that represent our body taking food and making ATP. The first task to do in your notebook is to create a brainstorm web like you see in this picture, so just copy it down in there. And what I want you to do is write the first 5 words that you think about when you hear the word respiration. Simple as that. The second task is interpreting the definition. So what we want to do is try to figure out, in our own words, what does this definition mean? And how does it relate to this picture? So we have turbose, and then we have ATP down here, but following the picture and the arrows, interpret the meaning of cellular respiration as represented by this situation that starts with turbose and ends with ATP. So your job is to look at the definition, share what you think it means, and relate it to this picture here, or this model of turbose down to ATP. Next slide. All right. This is a slide just to remind everyone that we did an activity called Build a Molecule. So if you haven't done that assignment, PhET Build a Molecule, you definitely should. And in that activity, you build a glucose or a form of a carbohydrate. Not quite glucose, is smaller, but you'll build a carbohydrate, a 3-carbon carbohydrate, one that your body might find in its own body, so a form of a carbohydrate. All right, in this picture, it's reminding us again that we're in chapter 9.3, or the last section of chapter 9. And the task here is to watch these videos, which provide some relevance or relates how our body uses energy to all these technical chemical things we're seeing here. It says in your notebook, it says identify a physical challenge or activity that you've done that helped someone else or that brought recognition or talents to yourself. So anything you've ever done where someone recognized you had some skills, or describe a time where you did something physical or like a physical activity or anything physical that helped someone else. All right, this slide right here references another worksheet activity where you complete this thing called Explore Interactive Tutorials. And I have a worksheet for this. If you know you didn't go to if you didn't go to a website that looks like this and complete a worksheet with it that has you doing about 3 different sections of work with this tutorial, please do so. And you can get there by Googling Bioflix Respiration Pearson. So if you Google this, you can get to that website and you can kind of look and see, well, did I do this? Does this look familiar? If not, do it. All right, next slide. Here's cellular respiration. Now this is our second slide for cellular respiration, and you can see here's the chemical equation, as they call it. This chemical equation represents how our body uses glucose, or a carbohydrate, to make energy. You can see here, this is our glucose, this is our oxygen, our carbon dioxide, our water, and then energy, which it just says energy, but we know that our body's form of energy is ATP. All right, in your task, in your notebook, you are to match each of these molecules to the written form of its name here. So water, we know is right here, but do the rest. So you'd say water equals H2O. You'd say oxygen equals, which one of these is oxygen? So I'm just trying to help you confirm that you understand what are each of the items in this chemical equation. That you know that glucose is glucose, that oxygen is oxygen, that carbon dioxide is carbon dioxide. Now, the last part of this task in your notebook is to explain in your own words what this means, or what you think it means. So you're going to summarize and write in your own words what this chemical equation means. Now, this chemical equation is written using symbols or chemical formulas like C6H12O6 and O2, CO2, and H2O, which we know is water. But you're gonna take it and transform it into a written form. So write it in your own way what you think this whole chemical equation means. Good luck. All right, this slide references a worksheet, and your goal before. Now these were partners, but if you haven't got this done yet, you can just do it on your own, where you go from reaction to reaction all the way until you finish, and you're studying the process what's called glycolysis, which is the first steps of when you eat glucose or forms of carbohydrates. What process does it go through in the body when you first eat it? And you can see here that it does show some examples of ATP getting formed, 2 ATP along the way. So a lot of reactions, a couple ATP made, or energy produced. So this represents a little bit of this cellular respiration equation, because we can see glucose and some energy. So far, though, in this glycolysis, we have yet to see how water is involved or how oxygen is involved. The worksheet for this assignment, if you haven't done it, it looks like this. If you do not complete it, now it has space for a partner's name, but don't worry about that if you haven't done it yet. But you need to look at the overall process and kind of summarize what you think it looks like, or what you think is happening in glycolysis. And then you go from reaction to reaction and talk about how from each reaction, and again, each reaction is this to this. So reaction 1 is glucose going to this. Reaction 2 is this going to this. Reaction 3 here would be this molecule going to this one. Reaction 4, a special reaction, is this large structure becoming 2 smaller molecules. Reaction 4 is looking at these 2 smaller molecules becoming this guy. And as this writing says here, there's 2 here, but then for simplicity in my picture, I'm only drawing 1. But just know that there's 2 of this, 2 of this, 2 of this, 2 of this, and 2 of this. And if you're thinking, does that mean there's 2 ATP here, really, and 2 ATP here, really? That is correct. So again, there's 2 smaller structures here, but I only drew 1 here on this slide. for simplicity, so it didn't take up too much space. But just know that the 2 here, there's still 2 here. I just didn't draw each one. All right, and then there's a reminder here too. Although there's only 1 pyruvate shown, there's actually 2. So again, to the worksheet, briefly, you go each reaction and you talk about how a number of carbon, oxygen, or hydrogen have changed along the way. You describe the structure in your own words. Was there any new molecules or atoms added to the structure, etc.? All right, good luck. All right, so this slide is what happens after you eat glucose. So there's this link right here, and on Google Classroom, you can access this link and go to this site, and you're going to watch the computer animation that walks us through glycolysis. So really what you're looking at is another form of glycolysis. So instead of looking at this slide to represent glycolysis, you'll see it animated in live action and kind of see how things move around and do things. One hint is that you'll see how water is involved in cellular respiration when you watch this. Your goal is to write observations, but before you write these observations, your goal is to read this question and come up with a hypothesis here. What is your answer to this question? So the question is, what happens after you eat glucose? Well, you should be writing right here what you think the answer is to that mystery or that scientific problem. Once you do that, you want to collect observations from this website again. And then right here at the bottom, you're going to write, remind us what your hypothesis was, and let us know, were these observations you collected, did they help support or go against your original hypothesis? So your ability to say if your hypothesis was supported or not is the key to success with this assignment. If you don't have this worksheet, no big deal. Just follow this structure of scientific problem, write that down, write your observations, your hypothesis, and your statement of understanding down here in your notebook. But just title that page Statement of Understanding and you're fine. Or you can get a separate piece of paper and then put it in your Chapter 9 pocket. All right, moving on. Here we go. This slide recognizes that there are 3 phases when your body is making energy from a carbohydrate. And if we look at a specific type of carbohydrate, a basic carb called glucose or sugar, we see that it goes through 3 stages. Glycolysis, which we've already talked about, and we see that it produces 4 ATP. We have our citric acid cycle we haven't talked about yet. It produces 2 ATP, so even fewer. It's happening in the mitochondria, which is this guy right here. And then we have the electron transport chain. It produces 32, the majority, or I believe, let's see, that's about 90% of the ATP made from carbs. So when you eat carbohydrates, 90% of the ATP made from that happens due to the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. All right, so we want to copy that down as notes. And we also want to kind of relate where each process is happening relative to the mitochondria. So this gray structure here is mitochondria. And your first task is to draw a simplified model of a mitochondria, just like this one. So draw a structure that looks like a bean with some wavy features inside. It has a lot of surface area, or these wave lines. They have a lot of membrane, so it's increasing the membranes highly, and that's important because the membranes play a role. The more membrane you have, the more ATP the mitochondria can make. Anyhow, draw this structure in your notebook, and then you want to fill in this table. So you need to copy this table down. You need to figure out glycolysis happens where. So look here, there's glycolysis. It's happening outside of the mitochondria. Meanwhile, you have this process. Which one of these is it? You would put here, and it shows that it happens in the inner membrane. Another way you could say this is inside mitochondria. All right, and then the electron transport chain, is it happening in or outside of the mitochondria? All right, the last thing is compare contrast amount of ATP made in each step. What that means is look at this, this, and this, and look about the amount, and the larger the ATP sign, the more is made. Which one do you think makes the most? Which make the least? Etc. And you would compare and contrast, show how they're similar. So what's similar about any of these processes? What do they have in common? And what do they show that's different? Whether their location of where they make ATP or perhaps the amounts, yeah? Okay, watching this video talks about how the body, at least one person's situation where they are constantly using a tremendous amount of ATP. So it's interesting, I'd watch it. It's a person that was born with an unusual disorder. All right.